the guys from Ping, they've kind of shown me how much the equipment matters.
I just love that I can hit any shot I kind of want.
We're going to be able to tell some fun stories about what goes on here to help golfers play better golf.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Ping Proving Grounds podcast. I'm Shane Bacon. That is Marty Jertson. Marty, how we doing?
Great, Shane. Loving it. In the office and trying to solve problems.
By the way, Marty, I just got a new PLD in the mail, and I went with the mallet. I went a little bit more mallet style. I had a little bit more of a blade one in the previous iteration. Stamping on the bottom, I have kind of a little bit of a equation, if you will, with like my kids and my dog's names on the bottom of it. But this is something I really believe in. I went out today, I've got the putting green in the backyard. I went out there, I set up for a 10-footer. I feel like you got to make the first putt with a new putter.
How'd it go?
I made it. I
Yes.
snuck it in. But it's like you can't miss the first putt with a brand new, beautiful putter, right? You got to make that thing to give it the good vibes you need as you go forward.
Yep. I was at the range last night. I saw a guy in the range. He's the best scratch golfer at my club. And he bought a new fancy shaft and he was screwing it in and he's all excited. And I was sneaking over there to see how that first shot went. And it was pretty good.
You need to hit the first drive with the new driver well. You need to hit the first wedge. You need to clip it. I remember I had a friend of mine one time. He holed out with a new wedge, brand new wedge in the bag. Hold out first swing with it.
Oh boy!
Never hit another good shot with it.
That's next
level. Lasted like 4 months at his bag. He said I exhausted the good swing the first time out, and that thing never produced another positive. But hopefully the putter will produce it. It's one of the more beautiful ones I have ever had. But Marty, today I wanted to jump in and dive into an issue with a lot of golfers, an issue maybe the golfers don't even understand they have. And this isn't just everyday players. This is a professional golfer issue as well. And it's, it really kind of goes back to the rules of golf. We can have 14 clubs in our bag. That's the maximum allowed in a golf bag to compete and play in tournaments. And I'd say, everyday players abide by this rule for the most part. I mean, occasionally you might see somebody with 16 or 17 clubs in there. Maybe they have a desert club if they're out in Arizona, but
Exactly.
14 clubs is the number. And when 14 sounds like a lot. If I went upstairs and asked my wife, who's not a golfer, does 14 clubs kind of cover, the basis of a golf round? She'd probably go, yeah, of course, that sounds like a ton. But as golfers, we know that 14 typically means there's a space in our bag that has a hole. And so I wanted to dive a little bit into that because gapping isn't just a golfer issue, but it's a company issue, and it's something Ping has spent a lot of time trying to solve.
Yeah, Shane, I think you introduced the topic great, which is like, what is gapping? Like, what does it mean to the everyday golfer? What does gapping mean? Like, it might mean like you have even space between your irons. Like some people might think that. Some people might think it's like, well, which wedges do you play? I think what we should do is like define it a little bit.
Yep.
And you let it off. It's like you got 14 clubs. It's an optimization issue, right? When I put my engineering hat on it, it's like you got your driver. That's designed to do pretty much one thing, which is go very as far as possible while being mindful of distance. We'll talk about that sometime, distance versus accuracy. Then you have your putter, which that's doing its job. And with rare exceptions, people with two drivers or two putters, you got 12 clubs in between. How do you slice and dice those to help you play your best golf, right? I think that's a good definition of like what gapping is. We've called it set makeup or bridge fitting or what have you. And then, yeah, I think you're right. I think not a lot of people know like what to do or how to solve it or, what does your fitter do, when you're trying to solve these problems. So there's like a lot of self-experimentation that happens when you're trying to figure this out.
When you talk about gapping, Marty, and you talk about an average golfer, an everyday player versus a professional golfer, are the gaps different for those two groups?
Yeah, no, that's a great point. I mean, I think that the faster swing speed players, your gapping is more about how far do you carry the ball. Like your PGA Tour player, man, they're doing their calculations. It's all about, okay, what's the cover? You're solving for that cover number where you want to pitch the golf ball. And it's a lot about carry. The slower you are in club head speed, the more it is about your total gaps, right? It's like carry plus roll. So we've even built our tools like that. And one fun thing, Shane, we've kind of noticed in our in our data analysis that we've done is that there's a good way to kind of figure out what your optimal gap is, which is if you ever go on a launch monitor going for a fitting, and a lot of our competitors fit with a 7-iron, you take whatever your ball speed is in your 7-iron in miles per hour. So if yours and mine are close to the same, we're like 130-ish. So 130 miles an hour with our 7-iron, you divide that by 10, and that's 13. That's a good spacing between your irons. And that works whether you're a tour player or if you hit your 7-iron shorter, you're like 80 miles an hour 7-iron, 8-yard gap is good. If you're Tony Finau, 13.5 yards is like a good gap. So it's kind of a cool, fun little trick you can do.
Yes, I mean, so you guys have done studies and tried to figure out the exact number between clubs, because I think when you envision how far your golf clubs go, people love round numbers, right? They love something ending in a 0. I know tour guys, people like yourself, really understand how far a stock club goes. The everyday player probably struggles a little bit more in that department, A, because they don't hit it as consistently, and B, maybe they just don't understand how far they hit certain golf clubs. They might, in their brain, think if I hit it perfect, it goes this distance, but maybe what your average would be. But 13 yards, that seems to be the number that you'd like to really kind of hammer when you're talking about gapping.
Yeah, if your ball speed's 130, which is us, you know what I mean? So that's the thing. We hear, okay, 10-yard gaps is good, 15's good, whatever. It scales to your speed, and that's a good way to kind of just get to that number kind of quick, But Shane, one fun thing we've done is to try to figure out, well, where are people on the golf course? Where are they hitting most of their shots? Because if you're trying to optimize your bag and you're like, okay, it sounds convenient to have evenly spaced gaps for all these 12 clubs. Well, that might not be where you are playing a lot of golf. And so we did this really fun thing in the last couple of years where we used our data partnership with Arcos, which provides like on-course play, tens of millions of shots we have access to of golfers of all different skill levels playing all different types of courses all over the world. We could go in and say, okay, where are these golfers playing? Where are they hitting these different clubs on the course? And should we design tighter spacing where they are the most? That was kind of like our hypothesis, right? And so that was a really fun exercise we did and we went through.
So, okay, for somebody like me, right? I have always battled with the kind of high and low. So my gapping issue is either I'm adding a longer club. So, I mean, I've always been a big kind of 2-iron guy. I love the idea of 2-iron and 3-iron, but I feel like I'm going to hit a hell of a lot more wedges than I'm ever going to hit a 2-iron or 3-iron in a round of golf. So for me, I've always been a 4-wedge setup guy. I like having the pitching wedge, the gap wedge, the sand wedge, and the lob wedge, because, as you said, you're diving into information, you're diving into data, you're studying all this stuff, and you're seeing that most golf shots for somebody with my distance are going to be in those scoring areas. So that's where it should be maybe tighter versus a 4 or 5-iron.
That's exactly the hypothesis. And we're still working to try to figure that out exactly, right?
Okay.
Like, you might not hit that driving iron a ton, or depending on your particular golf course, you may play your home course where it's like, you got to chip it off. You might be hitting your little stinger driving iron off 8 of the tee boxes. I know one of my courses at my home course is like that. Like that's a very important club on that particular golf course. But this data analysis, what it allows us to do, Shane, and we're kind of sharing my screen here to look at a chart that shows where golfers are on the golf course, and then what clubs did they hit from those different distances. Okay. And what's fun to see here is you see that it kind of looks like a camel shape to it.
Right. Shout out Camelback Mountain.
Exactly. One of those big humps you see there is centered right around 140 to 150 yards. You see this enormous spike. And this is broken down, Shane. We broke this down into players who hit their driver like 170 to 204, 205 to 224, 225 to 239, and then 240 and further. And all those players, you see the same big spike at like 145 yards.
Yeah, that's the sweet spot.
That is the sweet spot. And so we've actually run the analytics, and you hit over 50% of your iron shots. So that's, say, let's call it your 5-iron through pitching wedge or 4 through pitch, whatever that is. You hit over 50% of those shots between 120 and 165 yards, right? And so what does that mean to equipment or how you should set up your bag? We, as the club company, Ping, man, we better design you to have some tight spacing in that area, right?
Marty, have you ever thought, or has anybody ever messed around with like half irons in that department where, I mean, you're thinking like an 8.5 iron or a 9.5 iron? I mean, obviously it's not something that we've seen on the market, but have there ever been, as you're diving into these types of analytics, this chart really shows the 140 yard is kind of the sweet spot. Has there ever been any thought into like half irons for those lower, irons before you get to the wedges?
Yeah, well, one fun story about that is, you may have heard of this one. Like Lee Westwood plays two U wedges. He's
He
played two
does.
gap wedges, and he's kind of funny. He writes his yardages on the back of the clubs for his wife who's caddying for him, and so he has two gap wedges. And so he's like, "Oh, well, which U wedge should I hit?" So he's kind of figuring out how to do that. What we've done is, instead of saying, hey, an 8 iron, 8.5 iron is, over a long period of time, the industry, and we've certainly done it, is you start squeezing in more wedges, right? So
Okay.
like in our new G430 iron set, you go to pitching wedge, you go to pitching wedge, then we go to a 45 degree, then a 50 degree. So you really try to like tighten up that spacing, because we've seen that as a big problem. Like, as folks want to go in, they get fit for irons, they go further, which is generally a good thing. As long as they're going high and landing steep, that's fine. Like, have somebody hit an 8 iron instead of a 7 is a good thing, as long as they land it steep. But the problem is if as you start strengthening those lofts, we found even on our G iron designs, we created bigger gaps right in here where golfers needed the most. So we fixed that, and we fixed it by adding another club to the bag, really. And so it's kind of like that half iron approach, Shane.
What do you say to people that tell you, okay, this is too complicated. There are too many wedges in the bag. You guys are offering me too many different tools for an area where I kind of hit a wedge all the time.
Yeah, I think that's where you got to tell that data story, and we're trying to, all of our fitters and our fitting network, we've showed them this data mine and they love it, because it's something you can't really measure in a fitting. And I think that's where we're trying to develop these tools, which is like, hey, after you go get fit, you get fit with a 7 iron, but when you go play golf, you're going to be having a lot of shots in this area. So you're going to need clubs for that area. So I think it's kind of using the data and empowering and telling those stories and marrying those two things up, quite frankly.
Where do players have their biggest gap? Because I know you've showed some information about where they hit the most shots from. Where do you typically find that gap being the biggest issue for a player?
Yeah, I think it's in a couple areas. It's they don't have the right transition between their pitching wedge and, their gap wedge, sand wedge, whatever that situation is, can cause a lot of problems for what we were just talking about. Shane, I played in pro-ams around here in the Southwest section, and we'll be playing like, they could take my drive 6 times, and Arizona golf,
Right.
like, you're always at like 130, 135. You're a Greyhawk, like driving down there 135. And I play with these AMs, and they play these strong lofted juiced irons where their pitching wedge literally will go like further than mine. It'll go like 155. Then their next club is a sand wedge they lay that bloop up in the air because they don't have the right spin loft. It goes like 100. So we're at 130 all day, and they got no club for 130. They don't
There's
even
a 50
realize
yard
that.
gap here.
Yeah, they don't even realize that. So this is what our data is kind of validating, is like, hey, that's one real weak spot. And then the other one, Shane, I think is maybe more obvious, is, how do you build the bag between your lowest lofted 3-wood, your hybrids and your irons, and getting the gap at that point is both a distance gap, but it's also like a trajectory gap. It's like, how high do you need to hit that golf ball, right? So those are the two areas that I think people could use a lot of help with.
Is that more often the case with tour players? You see it obviously when they're further away from the hole. I mean, you're thinking about a player that has, let's say they have 4 iron through wedges, and maybe they've got a 3-wood. It's finding that tool. And you and I have discussed, obviously the popularity of the 7-wood. And I mean, the crossover world has really, in my opinion, changed that space for me, at least. I mean, I have a 3 iron crossover that I've been playing for years in different iterations, and it is huge for me because the versatility I find with it. It's not just that I can mash it and really get it out there if I need to 250, but I can kind of hit that softer one with the crossover if I need to hit the 235 shot.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think you're a good example of of what those tour players do. And tour players quite often will travel with maybe 16 or 17 clubs,
Okay.
and 2 of them they'll be swapping in week in and week out. I think Victor at the Masters this year, 13 and 15. We built them a 7-wood literally for those 2 shots, those approach shots. And we saw him the entire tournament and on the weekend hitting it on the green. He could obviously not do that. Shane, I mean, Gus is built for lefties. I mean, that's a separate topic, right? But you'd be able to hit your high cut in there maybe with your crossover, but you got that ball above your feet and you need that 7-wood. So yeah, there's a lot of mixing and matching that happens week in and week out that quite honestly, I think the everyday golfer doesn't need that. They don't need to be mixing those clubs. Maybe you're not traveling as much. You're playing most of your golf at your home course. You can kind of optimize your bag with your 14 clubs right there. But yeah, the tour players do some fun stuff. They'll play, 7 woods, short, closer to hybrid length to get the spin down, to get more control, to hit more down on it.
How much has that crossover family helped in terms of gapping? Because you saw the popularity. What was that? Probably early 2000s, this popularity boom of the hybrid. And then we started to see the driving iron become popular. But the issue with the driving iron for most players was they couldn't get it up in the air. What has the crossover family done to kind of help in terms of that gapping?
Yeah, so I think it's been great. It's been nice to have all these options in that space. So you got, generally speaking, you got irons that are going to fly the lowest. Then we designed our crossover to be quote unquote, kind of not a driving iron because it does go higher. Now, a skill player like yourself, you can still sting it down there, make it act like a driving iron. So you got irons, then you got crossovers to go a little bit higher, hybrids that go higher, then high lofted fairway woods that go the highest, right? So that's your spectrum of options. Then it's all about, fitting the right club to your course, your playing style, what you need to do. Can you hit it low on command or not? But that crossover has been a great option kind of between irons and hybrids. And a lot of people like that flat face because you can have more workability to it as well.
Marty, one of the coolest parts about being involved with you guys at Ping has been seeing the innovation in terms of just kind of outward thinking, thinking outside the box to help a player. And you're in the putting lab right now. I mean, it's a place where you can go in there and use technology to your benefit. But I was floored when you showed me this gapping app that you guys have been working on. And I know you're really proud of it. I mean, we're not just talking about gapping because it's an issue. There's also technology that Ping has worked on and now can throw at a player that not just, Marty, can help them in terms of their bag setup and keeping that gap number where it needs to be, but also not exhausting them out on the driving range when they're working through the bag.
Yeah, I mean, even a lot of us around the office, like I've asked a lot of our engineers here. We're at the proving grounds. We got TrackMan. We got tons of TrackMan. We got the range right there. Hey, how many of you guys have gone out and hit every single club in your bag?
Right?
3 to 5 good shots and jot down your numbers. I mean, it's hard to do. It takes a long time to do. I mean, even the tour players, sometimes that's like a big exercise to do a true quote unquote gapping where you're doing that, you're micro tweaking lofts, etc. So the problem we wanted to solve, Shane, was like, how do we deliver gapping without exhausting the player, without putting all these different models and lofts and a 3-iron, a 4-iron, a 5-iron, a 6-iron, 8-9 wedge, all that stuff out with our fitting network out there, but still solve this problem of gapping. And so we did it. We did it by taking our like fundamental physics knowledge to know, okay, if I change the loft of an iron by 1 degree, what does that do to ball speed, launch and spin? What does that do to carry? And then we married that to like our detailed gap testing that we do at the proving grounds. We merged those two things together to create a predictive tool. This is like magic. It's like you can go out, hit a 7-iron, you get your ball speed, launch and spin, you plug it into this app we made, which we call the gapping app. It's out with our fitting network right now. It's kind of in beta mode, but it's still magical. It's definitely worth using. And you put in your 7-iron numbers only, and then like what club model you got fit into. So G430, I230, what have you. And the app will, with a very high degree of accuracy, predict how you're going to hit the rest of your clubs in your bag. And it will tell you, hey, how high will I hit the 4-iron or the 5-iron or the 4 hybrid? And you can go in there without hitting the 4 hybrid, the 7-wood, and the iron replacement, see what that would do to your trajectory. And that's specific to you. And it's specific to your temperature and elevation where you're playing golf, right?
Yeah, I mean, like we did this, you and I did this when I was out in Phoenix. And I mean, you throw in the area of the country you live in.
Yep.
I mean, you can throw in kind of like the average temperature, or it'll predict it for you. And what I loved was you can kind of, as you mentioned, you can interchange things. I mean, you can change in what club you maybe want to hit, or maybe what you're thinking about changing in your bag, and it will kind of figure out the numbers for that. And it's just really smart, because I do think, as a golfer that has been lucky enough to get fit a decent amount throughout his life in a lot of different circumstances, going to a fitting can feel intimidating
Yeah.
for a lot of golfers. I mean, there's a lot going on. There's TrackMan, there's technology. You have a fitter in front of you. There's so many things happening. And to think, all right, I'm going to be here hitting, 20 lob wedges, and then I'm going to hit 20 sand wedges, and then I'm going to hit pitching wedge and gap wedge. And to think about how much time, effort, and then consistency in the golf swing that's got to get you all the way through driver to go in here and just be able to hit, what is it, 10 or 15 7-irons, and then basically be dialed.
Yeah.
It takes so much of the pressure off.
Yeah, and this is a weird thing to think about, but actually you nailed it, in that our app that we're looking at here on the screen predicts how you're going to hit all these clubs with more accuracy than you going yourself and hitting them. You would have to hit them yourself like 50 or 100 times, right? Because it's kind of like, artificial intelligence. Like, we know based on the length, the model, the lofts, and the environmental conditions with our ball model, like with a higher degree of accuracy. So we have engineers around the office that are going out, hitting their 7-iron, plugging it into our app, and you could download this PDF report, and it gives you all your yardages, and they're going to play golf and using that, put it in their yardage book, and it's like spot on.
And you even have, I mean, to people that aren't looking at the screen, I mean, you should check this out. It's very much worth your time. But there's even a simplified version of this app where, again, you can go to the simplified version and make it even easier on yourself, and that will help you get as dialed as you can in terms of your gapping issue.
Yeah, we're trying to build tools, Shane, that are, kind of fast, quick, and easy, and then very advanced. Like the gapping app, we'll use that with our tour players to get down into the weeds. You know what I mean? But yeah, you can go in. Our fitters can go in, use our Copilot gapping tool. You pick which iron model. You just put in about how far you hit your 7-iron. Do you hit it high, medium, or low? And you get set makeup, and it'll give you a couple options. Like, this is a fast swing speed player. This is like your speed: 3 wood, 3 hybrid, or 3 crossover, 4 through pitch, right? And that, or you could go back and put in, G series iron. You hit your 7-iron 122, a little lower. You're going to get a totally different set configuration recommendation. Like we see, 3 wood, 7 wood, 5 hybrid, 6 through pitch, right? So it's really cool. Gapping does not have to be intimidating, and we've created some really cool tools to do this super accurately.
Marty, how does something like this come about? Like, I mean, again, I find it fascinating that it feels like you guys have a real passion for solving the problem. Let's solve the inconsistency in the stroke. Let's get a putter in your hand that you actually need to use. Let's make sure that you're using the right grips and the right shafts. All of those things that we feel like we've kind of conquered that in the golf space. How does something like the gapping app come about from idea to actually seeing on a screen?
Yeah, that's such a great question, Shane. I think it's a combination of a few things. One, we want to help people play their best golf. Two, we go out and we go to a lot of conferences. We spend a lot of time with our fitters, and we look at what are they struggling with? Like, what is hard to do, but then what is important for the golfer, right? And there's that intersection point. So doing gapping out there is it's a big friction point for our customers and our fitters. Like, they're just, how do we do it? And so I thought a lot about, well, let's provide 4 irons and 5 irons, and to have the golfer hit them and see where can they still keep the ball in there? Can they still reach the landing angle? And we tried that. We tried. That's what the proving grounds is. We try to do that with people. And hey, we ran into those problems. They get, hey, tired, takes too long, can't hit enough good 4 irons. Like, so we experiment with these things. And then the other angle, Shane, is that we want to build a tool that lets the everyday golfer get access to what the tour player can do. Tour players on the range, they got TrackMan, they got foresight, they're hitting all their balls, they're micro tweaking all their clubs, they're doing it. Now, your everyday golfer might not be able to do that, but they might not be the elite athlete that the tour player is. So this gapping tool allows you to have the tour level service, like, to the everyday golfer. So I think it's the intersection of all those things come together to try to solve the biggest pain points for our fitters and for our end customers.
I'm a golfer. I'm listening to this. I don't know if I have a gapping issue or not, Marty. I just don't know. I don't quite know my bag. I don't quite know my carry distance. What do you say to those people? How can they do some personal investigation to try to best figure out where they might have a hole, if they have a hole, and how best to kind of attack that?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of great like stats tracking apps. So I think that's becoming more and more popular. So, we partner with Arcos. That's a great one. That's, smart technology and captures all that data in the app and allows you to overcome, I think, like what you highlighted, Shane, like, I don't know if I have a, have a gap or not. A lot of people don't.
I mean, you mentioned the Pro-Am player that's sitting there going, they don't realize that they have 50 yards of no golf club where you need that 50 yard the most.
Totally. So that's where technology, I think, it can be used in the right way. Like, not all the numbers are valuable all the time, but that is a great one, right? That is a great one. Highlighting it numerically, getting that little subtle edge. It'd be like looking at your sleep tracker and noticing whatever, some pattern in your behavior that you might not have noticed otherwise. You know what I'm saying? So that'd be a first place to start. Get some type of on-course tracking if you can. Number two, go see a ping fitter that's using our gapping app. Get your 7-iron numbers and plug them in there, and then just look at what our recommendation is relative to your bag. And then you might have some insights that could be fun, and you'll have some findings by just taking a look at doing that exercise only.
One of my big other pieces of advice, Marty, in this world is always just be open-minded. Just be a little open-minded about the golf bag. It's easy to feel like you're dialed to what you use. I'm always going to have a 3-wood. I'm always going to have a 3-iron. And I mean, I think the moment you kind of let go of that, that must in your golf game. I mean, I always have found one of the coolest parts about professional golfers, Marty, is their ability and their openness to tweaking. They're always tweaking stuff. They're always trying out new putting strokes and new putters and new clubs and different ideas, because the goal at the end of the day, how can I shoot the lowest score? How can I shoot the lowest possible number? And I feel like the pro golfer's so open-minded, yet the everyday golfer maybe struggles a bit with opening their mind up to some of these things.
That's a great point, Shane. We see it here. It's like, because in part of gapping, it's like, hey, do you, I hear this question a lot. Fitter will ask the player, hey, do you prefer hybrids over fairway woods, right? And if you ask that to the player, they're not going to be open-minded, But so many golfers leave the proving grounds playing a hybrid instead of a long iron, instead, playing a 5 hybrid instead of a 5-iron, or a 7-wood instead of that 4-iron, and they love it. Or on the other side of the bag, Shane, what sometimes if a golfer's going to conform to the 14 clubs, we'll take that 4 hybrid out and they leave with a chipper. And now they love chipping. Like, so you can solve chipping. So gapping is not only about your fairway woods hybrids and not hanging on to, hey, I need a 400 in my bag, but it could be also on the other end of the bag. And we've had so many golfers love the chipper. And then, it's a question of optimizing those 12 clubs between driver and putter, of what gives to add that chipper. And we've seen a lot of golfers be ecstatic about that decision.
I was just recently on a golf trip to North Carolina. One of my buddies, who I think he's a 6 handicap, one of my best friends, his chipper, the grip is already wearing out. That's how much he's using his chipper. And as you know, Marty, in North Carolina, on those crazy greens around Pinehurst, the chipper is almost mandatory to be able to get the ball up and down. Because, if you're not using a chipper, using a 7-iron, your hybrid. But I love the fact that there's a golf club out there now simply for that shot. And I know that it helps him out so much, he's willing to sacrifice a spot in the bag to get the ball up and down around the greens.
Oh yeah, Shane. My mind went right to that chart that we talked about earlier with the camel and the big humps. And the big hump in club usage for your irons is like 145 yards. Well, the other big spike is you're hitting your lob wedge or whatever a lot around the green. So that's exactly the case. Like, that is that is almost certainly the most used club in his bag outside his putter,
Yeah, the gapping for me is I have the crossover, and you guys built me an awesome 7-wood. And so now I'm going to be the guy that carries 15 clubs to like a practice round.
You're
so
the
that I can
victor.
now go, oh, we'll see. We'll see. Is it a 7-wood golf course or is it a crossover golf course? In terms of the gapping app, Marty, is that going to be something that's now available? I mean, if you go to a Ping Fitter, is that something they can show you and actually implement?
Yeah, we have tons of our fitting network here in the US and around the world that have just started using it. We still call it beta mode because we're just ironing out a few little bugs here and there. But yeah, almost all of our fitters are using that gapping app. So go in, ask your Ping fitter, say, hey, I heard about, I saw this cool gapping app. I want to get on it and use it. And if not, they'll sign up for it and get access to it and jump right on there. And then eventually we'll have that available so you can go on our website, find a fitter, and see who's using our Copilot tool and go find your local fitter close by.
Well, it's an interesting topic, and I feel like it's something that we don't talk enough about in golf. And as I said off the top, you said it perfectly about the pro-am golfer. We spend so much time playing golf. You spend so much time of your life. I always think about the adult that plays golf. Adults don't have a lot of hobbies, Marty. Those hobbies, I feel like the older you get, they fall out and, you're not collecting stuff anymore and you're not traveling and getting pins, but you're still playing a ton of golf. Yep. And to not have a perfect golf bag for your game to at least help you in the best possible way shoot your best score and play your best golf is just simply, kind of overlooking the important part of what you want to do with your free time. So the gapping is maybe a term you don't always hear in and around the game, but I feel like it's one of the most important things the everyday golfer can do to help them make golf easier, which we're all trying to do. Yep. And so kudos to you and the team for the gapping app and trying to attack this, because I think it's really smart. And I think the more people hear about this, the more they might look in their own golf bag and go, oh, I do have a 30-yard hole here.
Yeah. Yeah, no, exactly. And if nothing else, just be mindful of that cool data analysis we did too, which is, hey, between that 120, 165, that's where you're hitting tons of shots. So be mindful of your gaps there. Use some technology to measure it if you can, or if you're open to that. And go in, find a Ping fitter, check out that gapping app, because it provides you that leverage, like as if you're getting that full service of a tour player.
And if you're a driving range owner, let's put a green out there at 140. Just put a target out at 140. That's what we need going forward. I'm Shane Bacon. That's Marty Jertson, and this is the Ping Proving Grounds podcast.